But warnings from the Tsar of Russia, who supported Serbian independence, were ignored. The Austrian Empire was weak and old, but its army was strong. Tsar Nicholas II.
I am Nicholas II, Tsar of all the Russias. The Kaiser, the King of England and I are all cousins. We all rule very large empires and have very strong armies, as does Austria and France. But England relies on her navy.
Winston Churchill, First Lord of the British Admiralty.
We had the smallest army in Europe, but we also had the biggest navy. The Kaiser called our army contemptible. And so, with the passage of time, they became known as the Old Contemptibles. We had no desire to be involved in a land war in Europe, but we knew that if Germany attacked France, they would do so through tiny neutral Belgium.
We had a tiny army and we were a neutral country and we needed Britain to help us.
I persuaded my government that we should support Belgium, and we told the Kaiser this. He only laughed and said,
England may have many battleships,
but ships do not have wheels. We will use our siphon plan, sneak through Belgium behind the French army's backs.
General Joseph Joffre.
The commander of the French army. We French knew the British would help us.
And so the stage was set. Europe stood on the brink of war, with Germany and Austria together, later joined by Turkey, against Russia, France, and yet to decide, Britain. All that was needed to start the fuse burning was an incident. And it happened. The heir to the Austrian and Hungarian throne, the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, decided that he would visit Serbia to open a hospital. Although he was warned against it, the trip still went ahead. But the car took a wrong turn. With no reverse gear, had to be pushed back, becoming a sitting target for Gavrilo Princip, the assassin. The fuse had been lit. And so, on the 28th of June 1914, the burning fuse reached the bomb. Germany attacked France through Belgium. Britain declared war on Germany to support Belgium. Austria attacked Serbia. Russia attacked both Germany and Austria. All of Europe was at war. A war that many thought would be over by Christmas, but one that would drag on for 4 long years to cause 16 million dead and over 20 million wounded. It became a world war, the worst war the world has ever known. Huge losses occurred, as did the warfare methods of galloping cavalry charges were ineffective against a modern machine gun, barbed wire, and well-aimed artillery. Both sides could not advance and simply dug holes to protect themselves. The holes became bigger, and were linked into trenches that eventually ran from neutral Switzerland to the French coast. In Russia, both Austrian, Hungarians and Germans against the Russian armies were slowly bleeding themselves white. The losses were huge as each side launched attack after attack, only to have their soldiers cut down by the thousands. And due to diplomatic bungling by Britain, Turkey had entered the war on the side of Germany and Austria. This was serious. By February 1915, the allies of Britain, Russia, and France had suffered 1.5 million casualties. A new plan was needed.
I was in charge of the British Navy. The Turkish army had closed the Dardanelles, that narrow strip of water that we needed open to get our supplies through to Russia and for international shipping to continue. I knew that if my warships could blast their way through the straits and bombard Istanbul, we could blast Turkey out of the war.
Sir John Michael de Robeck. Winston gave me the job. It should have been easy, but we struck trouble. My battleships hit mines and the Turkish guns fired us on from the shore. I was in danger of losing the Navy.
I had to beg the good Lord Kitchener to give me soldiers to put ashore to capture those gunners and let our ships through.
I am General Sir Ian Stanford Monteith Hamilton, and I was given the job. But who would I use? The French had offered us some troops because all others were fighting in France, but I of course had my British 29th Division. Jolly good chaps. Mind you, of course, they were British. And all the troops were available.
In the meantime, we'd been sent to Egypt along with the Aussies to form an army corps. Someone worked out that the initials read ANZAC, the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps. Oh, crikey. It's always the Aussies that get in first, isn't it? Even in a name.
I jolly wondered how those jolly colonials would go, you know. Mind you, they've been pretty good on the Boer War. Yes, probably good enough for a sea cruise, I would expect. Nevertheless, who else could I use? No other troops were available.
We were busting to go. Give that Johnny Turk a good kick up the bum. Oh, we were well trained and fighting fit and jolly good shots. Would be easy.
I trusted my good General Ian Hamilton. We would put those Anzacs ashore on the flat beaches of Gavrilo at dawn, and they would capture the peninsula.
It was a huge undertaking. An amphibious landing like this had not been attempted before. The troops assembled at the island of Lemnos. The plan called for the British to beach an old ship, the River Clyde, carrying the soldiers to the bottom tip of the peninsula known as Cape Helles. While at dawn, the Anzacs would attack halfway up the peninsula and cut it off. The French army would also land in the south, carrying out a feint attack on the Aegean side of the straits. How wrong the belief that the Turkish soldiers were not good fighters. After all, they were defending their homeland. And so, on the dark of the morning of the 25th of April 100 years ago, the rowboats carrying the Anzacs touched the sand in what was to become known as Anzac Cove. But something was wrong.
We leapt out of the boats. This was no gentle farmland. This was steep ridges and cliffs.
Things were not going according to plan.
So I carried the boats away from the correct landing spots. But it was too late now. The boys would just have to do the best they could. My battleships and cruisers, we stood offshore and shelled the Turkish positions.
We battled upwards, up Walker's Ridge, up the Straits. My mates were cut down like flies. This was hopeless, but we hung on.
My name is Mustafa Kemel. I was in charge of the Turkish troops. I ordered troops rush to the area to fight these invaders. I told my men, I do not order you to fight. I order you to die. And so many of them did.
Things weren't going according to my plan. My men were being cut to pieces. So I ordered them, dig in, dig, dig. It had just become another trench warfare.
It was so hot. We weren't allowed to drink from our water bottles and we were exhausted. And the flies, they fed on the dead and they were there in the billions. We only had to eat a piece of bully beef ration and our mouths were full of them. It was awful.
And the wounded. We had not expected so many and we simply could not cope. These poor lads, they lay in the sun while shells burst overhead and without any water, so many of them died.
I planned another attack. Time again we drove forward, only to be cut down in our thousands. Again, the dead and the dying lay in the sun. Again, like this, our attack failed.
So, in early May, an armistice was arranged. Both sides left their trenches and met in the area of ground between them. It was known as no man's land. The sights and the stench were awful. However, both sides exchanged cigarettes and got on with the job of burying the dead. And in the evening, it started all over again.
And it carried on. It was said of the ANZACs that they were lions led by donkeys. In the south, the British were doing no better. ANZAC troops were sent by sea to reinforce the British and French, but to no avail. So many New Zealand lads who had survived the landings were killed for virtually no gain. The attacks were murderously cut down. The British General Amer Hunter Weston became known as the Butcher of Hellas and was later referred to as one of the most brutal and incompetent commanders of the First World War, a true donkey general. General Hamilton and his staff officers sat safely offshore in battleships while the young soldiers died on the hills and beaches. All water had to be brought ashore in cans. Bully beef boiled in the cans and cheese became a runny liquid. An issue of jam became swamped in flies the moment it was opened, and the biscuits were so hard that men broke teeth trying to eat them. 1 second exposure above a sandbag was instant death due to sniper fire. This wasn't what had been expected, so another plan to break the deadlock was needed. Suvla Bay.
My great-uncle, Argyle Campbell, who farmed in Omahe by the Ironworks, from his diary written in the trenches of Gallipoli, these are his words. June 14th, 1915. On light duties, which means doing nothing today, Turks started shelling our gully at 6 o'clock this morning, killed a few mules and donkeys, but no men. There are a good many old, scraggy donkeys, the remnants of what was called the Donkey Army. When the British arrived, they had around 1,000 broken down donkeys and mules and hung lanterns on them and sent them along the road at night. The Turks naturally thought it was an army of men and set out after them. This allowed the British to get into a good position. The remains of the donkeys are sort of honoured guests, getting fed up and doing nothing. Some of the strongest of them are used for bringing the wounded down the hill to the dressing station. There is a southerly wind blowing today and the sea is very rough, even right here in the bay, which is always like a mill pond. I am very hard up for tobacco at present as we got no issue this week. June 22nd, 1915. Bombardment continued up till early this morning. Things fairly quiet out here. A few bullets knocking the dirt down on top of me as I write this. We have put an oil sheet up to keep the aim off us and the Turks must think it is a loophole. They are turning the machine gun on now and again. The aeroplane is having a tour around again to see how things are going on. A chap called Archer on the machine gun was shot through the head here just now. He was looking over the top through the telescope and got it right in the forehead. I went around and Dave Little, also from Omahe, and 2 others were carrying him out. He died before they got him to camp.
And so while the generals and the admirals discussed the situation on Gallipoli, men died in hopeless attacks and from sickness, wounds and disease. A breakthrough was essential. The south was a stalemate, no chance there. Fresh plans were needed. The armies, reinforced by fresh troops, would land in a surprise attack at Suvla Bay, further up the peninsula, and with flat ground for an attack. But where could the general be found to command the new attack? An enfeebled General Sir Fredrick Stopford was brought out of retirement to command the landings. He was tired and an old man, so sick that he couldn't even carry his own attaché case.
So I advised Stopford that this is what would happen. The Australians would attack at places such as the Neck and at Lone Pine, whilst the New Zealanders would take and hold the heights at Chunnock Bear. The Wellington Regiment, led by that good chap, Colonel William Malone, they were jolly good chaps, almost as good as British troops. Nevertheless, all this would draw Turkish troops away from Suvla Bay.
We muffled our boots. No bullets in our guns, only bayonets. At dark, we crept and climbed and reached Chunnock Bear. There were no Turkish soldiers there at all. We looked over the ridge and could see the Straits of the Dardanelles. We were the only troops to see them, so we dug in.
News reached me of the surprise attacks. I rushed troops to the area to drive these infidels back into the sea. But Suvla Bay was left undefended. What could I do?
General Sir Michael Fredrick Stopford. The landing was no problem. There were no Turkish troops. My men stood around with nothing to do. I decided not to move until I'd unloaded my big guns. Because after all, guns are everything.
I found spare troops and rushed them to the area. Immediately, run, run, run!
Suddenly the Turks attacked us at Chunnock Bear. Wave after wave, all shouted, Allah! Praise Allah! We piled up the dead bodies as barricades and fought them off. Wave after wave. They didn't stop. One after the other, my mates dropped. Many of them shot through the head. It was awful. We looked down to Suvla Bay, and the damn British soldiers were sitting on the beach drinking tea.
Oh, now we can move. My guns were ashore. I ordered my men to line up and advance in columns. We are, after all, we're the British Army, the best in the world.
The Navy shelled the ridge. One shell fell short and killed our leader, Colonel William Malone. Such a brave and good man. What a waste.
I could not believe my luck. Stupid and confident generals had lost the advantage. Now we held the high ground and could pick them off at will. Stupid and confident British generals. Again, lions, led by donkeys.
These poor boys started to come in ill and weak before these stupid attacks. They died in hundreds, calling for their mothers and sweethearts. I felt as if I would weep, but I had my job to do. I would be their mother and their sweetheart.
We were holding the ridge. We hung on for 2 days and nights, but we had no more soldiers.
These jolly colonials had done quite well. I was very surprised, but had been pretty badly depleted, so I considered I should have them relieved by good British regular troops.
We couldn't believe our eyes. These British lads were just boys. They cowered down. We crawled back to the beach, 70 left alive out of 700 we started with. Disaster. Another mess up.
We couldn't advance. The Turks were in control. Perhaps I should have got cracking earlier. It wasn't like this when I was fighting the Fuzzy Wuzzies.
We looked up to our ridge. The British boys were abandoning it and retreating. Me and my mates were so mad we could have shot them.
Another stalemate. Oh well, we'll just have to keep attacking there and keep attacking here and straighten the line.
Neither side could gain an advantage. Slowly the weather became colder. The flies disappeared, but the rains and the snow came. By November, the campaign had become just a huge drain on men and equipment, badly needed in France. Lord Kitchener, C&C British forces, had said, "Damn those Dardanelles," and now he visited the peninsula to look for himself. What he saw did not impress him, and he ordered a withdrawal.
So, I ordered my army and navy chiefs to organise an evacuation as quickly as possible. I know, of course, I would lose thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands, either captured or killed.
Slowly, over night after night, we will withdraw.
We left self-firing rifles and other tricks to confuse Johnny Turk. Many of my mates silently wept, knowing they were leaving their best mates behind, dead. That totally was the worst part.
My navy did a splendid job. They got all the boys off without one single casualty. But questions were asked of me, and I had to resign. I went to fight in France.
It was over. We were bitter and very angry. We had cold water, bully beef and biscuits for Christmas dinner, while the British officers dined on the best of fare.
After the war, I became president of a new Turkey. I saw to it that a monument was erected. Those heroes that shed their blood and lost their lives, you are now lying in the soil of a friendly country. Therefore, rest in peace. There is no difference between the Johnnies and the Mahits to us where they lie, side by side, here in this country of ours. You're the mothers who sent their sons from faraway countries. Wipe away your tears. Your sons are now lying in our bosom and are in peace. After having lost their lives on this land, they have become our sons as well.
New Zealand became a nation at ANZAC over 100 years ago. 2,721 young sons, brothers, husbands, fathers paid for this with their lives, fighting an enemy that they had no quarrel with. in a land they barely knew, and for what they did not understand. Today, as always, we will remember them.